The first step to etching the plate, which is the third part of the litho process, is to put a little bit of water under the plate like I'm doing here and make a suction that will stick the plate to the glass surface. That way, as I'm working on it, it won't slip around. And then I put some talc on the finished drawing. This is still the drawing materials, the touche and the litho crayon. And I'm adding talc to act as a surface tension reducer. So the gum arabic that I put on next will be able to penetrate the greasy surface of the drawing. And I'm just rubbing it in lightly, very lightly, with a soft cotton cloth to ensure that it's spread out equally and evenly. And then I'm going to mix up my acids. I have a tannic acid solution mixed with gum arabic. And the strength of the etch, the acid etch that I use, sometimes I use a little cup to mix up smaller amounts. And I'm pointing out that the greasier, the darker areas, I want to etch more heavily or more strongly. So first I put on a initial layer of just pure gum arabic, which protects the non-drawn areas, those image areas that are going to stay white. And I'm using a slightly dampened sponge for this process because it's both a warm day and it also allows the gum to spread smoothly because gum arabic is a bit sticky. So I'm spreading out the gum with just a slightly dampened sponge. And now I'm going to add the tannic acid and gum arabic solution directly to the drawn areas. And I'm carefully spot etching in places where I know have a heavy concentration of the grease. So the drawing materials that I used, a lot of like #1 crayon that has a heavy grease content, or the touche, which is the liquid that's been suspended in either water or mineral spirits. That has a lot more grease content and requires a heavier etch. You can see that I'm using the brush to kind of agitate the etch, the gum mixture. And when you etch, there's 3 different components that contribute to the strength of the etch. There is the literal strength, how much acid you add to the mixture. There's the agitation, so how much vigorousness you put into the application. In other words, whether you just paint it on and leave it, or whether you're scrubbing it in and really agitating that gum and activating it. And then there's the length of time. So if you just put on the solution once, then it will use itself up in about a minute. And if you continue to add more for areas that can be very strong, that require a very strong etch, you can add multiple applications of the etch up to about 3 minutes. So here I am adding some of the stronger etch solution to both the darker areas, the heavily greasy areas, in order to maintain the image quality, but also around the parts that I really want to stay white. I don't want those edges and that white area, the border, to pick up any kind of ink as I'm rolling the ink onto the plate at a later stage. So I can really etch those white areas strongly in order to keep them from holding the ink. And now I'm just refreshing the straight gum in those areas that have probably dried a little bit due to the heat. Then I'm going to take my sponge and kind of mop up the hot or the heavy greased areas, heavily etched areas. And then I'm going to buff the whole surface, the whole gum surface down, first with paper towel. And because the gum is sort of sticky, I will have to work very quickly before it dries to get a very thin layer. And so here you see I'm really quickly buffing with a cheesecloth, just a regular old bunched up cheesecloth. I'm forcing the gum and etch solution into the pores of the plate so that it really embeds in there. And I'm doing this by vigorously buffing down that gum layer to a very thin coating. And I will continue to do this until it's dry. And even after it's slightly dry, I will continue to do this to create a static charge, which also helps the etch process to work. And then I'll let the plate rest for a little while, about an hour. You can let it rest longer, but it doesn't need to be any longer than an hour. And then I will proof the plate. And that's going to be step 4. So stay tuned.